Widow's 18-year secret destroys everything when her twins discover who their real father is. Tori's hands trembled as she stared at the DNA test results scattered across her kitchen table. 18 years of lies were about to crumble. The front door clicked open, Ben's voice calling her name from the hallway. Her twins sat in the living room, their faces mirrors of the man who'd just walked in, the man who had no idea he was their father, the man whose best friend she'd buried with this devastating secret. How do you tell someone their entire life has been built on a lie? Tori? You home? Ben Wilson's warm voice drifted through the house, carrying that gentle authority she'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. His footsteps approached the kitchen, and raw panic shot through her chest. The DNA results. She had to hide them before he saw the scientific proof of what her heart had known for 18 years. Her fingers fumbled with the papers, probability of paternity 99.99%, blazing up at her like an accusation. One sheet fluttered to the floor just as Ben appeared in the doorway, his piercing blue eyes immediately focusing on her distress. At 45, Benjamin Wilson still possessed the quiet strength that had first drawn her attention in college. His work clothes, faded jeans and a button-down shirt with sleeves rolled up over forearms, corded with muscle from years of hands-on construction work, spoke to the architect who never forgot that buildings were meant to be touched, lived in, loved. Those same hands had held her exactly once, 19 years ago, creating the children whose laughter now drifted from the living room. What's wrong? He stepped closer, concern radiating from every line of his body. You look like you've seen a ghost. If only he knew how accurate that assessment was. The ghost of the choice she'd made 19 years ago, the specter of the secret that had shaped every interaction they'd had since David's funeral, the phantom of the love she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it had died along with her husband. Nothing. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter, joining the thousands of others she'd told him over the years. From the living room came Becca's voice, bright with excitement. Mom, can you look at this essay? I think I finally figured out how to end it. Ben's expression softened at the sound. College applications? Georgetown's scholarship program. She's been working on that essay for weeks. Tori's voice caught slightly as she watched Ben's face fill with pride, the same expression he'd worn at every school play, every graduation, every milestone in their children's lives. Their children. The children he'd loved and guided without ever knowing they carried his DNA, his artistic vision, his gentle strength. She'll get it, Ben said with complete confidence. Both of them will. They're incredible kids, Tori. You've raised... Ben's here, Brent's voice called. Out, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps. At 18, her son moved with the lanky grace of youth, all long limbs and boundless energy. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway, the resemblance to Ben was so striking that Tori's breath caught. Same blue eyes, same strong jaw, same artist's hands that gestured as he spoke. How had no one else noticed? How had she managed to keep this secret when the truth was written across her son's face in features that mirrored the man standing 3 feet away? Perfect timing, Brent continued. I wanted to ask you about that internship program at Morrison Associates. Do you think they'd consider a high school senior? Ben's face lit up with the particular joy he always showed when discussing architecture. I could put in a word with the partners. Your portfolio work is impressive enough to catch their attention. Really? You think so? I know so. You have an intuitive understanding of spatial relationships that most people take years to develop. Tori watched the interaction with her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. This was what their family had always been. Ben mentoring the children, encouraging their dreams, being present for every important conversation. The only thing missing was the acknowledgement of what he truly was to them, their father. Mom, you're doing that thing again, Becca said, appearing beside her brother with laptop in hand. At 18, she possessed an uncomfortable ability to read emotional undercurrents. That thing where you look at Ben like you're trying to memorize his face. Heat flooded Tori's cheeks as both Ben and Brent turned to look at her with sudden interest. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't, Becca said with the knowing smile of someone who'd been watching her parents dance around each other for years. Anyway, I really do need help with this conclusion. It's about the person who's most influenced my life, and I keep wanting to write about Ben, but feeling guilty about not focusing on Dad. The casual mention of David sent the familiar stab of guilt through Tori's chest. Her late husband, Ben's best friend, the man who'd known the truth and chosen to love her children anyway. David, who'd made her promise never to tell Ben the truth because he wanted their love to be chosen, not obligated. Your father would want you to write about whoever has actually influenced you most, Ben said gently, his voice carrying the warmth he always used when discussing David. He'd want you to be honest. Honest. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Besides, Brent added with characteristic directness, Ben's been more of a father to us than anyone else. I mean, I love Dad's memory, but Ben's the one who taught me to drive, helped me through calculus, stayed up all night when I had pneumonia. Brent, Tori said sharply, panic making her voice tight. What? It's true. He shrugged with teenage nonchalance. Ben's been our dad in everything but name since we were babies. Everyone knows it. Everyone except Ben himself, Tori thought desperately. Everyone except the man whose heart would shatter when he learned he'd been loving his own children from a careful distance for 18 years. Ben cleared his throat, the sound rough with emotion. You kids mean the world to me. You know that, right? Both of you. He stopped, struggling with words that came too close to the truth he didn't know he was speaking. You're the most important things in my life. The raw honesty in his voice made Tori's eyes fill with tears. This was why she'd kept the secret for so long. This moment, this pure love given freely without expectation or obligation. This was what David had wanted to preserve, the choice to love without the burden of biological responsibility. But looking at her son's face as he basked in Ben's approval, seeing her daughter's obvious affection for the man who'd been her unofficial father for 18 years, Tori realized the secret had become a prison for all of them. Actually, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, maybe we should all sit down. There's something we need to discuss. Ben's eyebrows rose. Something wrong? Everything. Nothing. The whole beautiful, complicated mess of their lives. Family meeting? Becca asked with interest. Ooh, are you guys finally going to admit you're in love with each other? The question hit the kitchen like a bomb. Brent snorted with laughter while Ben went completely still, his gaze snapping to Tori's face with sudden intensity. Becca Marie Nightingale, Tori managed through the chaos in her chest. What? Like it isn't obvious. Becca moved to the refrigerator with casual confidence. You two have been staring at each other with hard eyes for years. It's actually kind of sweet, in a really slow, really obvious way. Have you ever carried a secret so devastating it felt like it might destroy everyone you love? Tell me in the comments about the hardest truth you've ever had to face. Let me know where you're watching from around the world, and hit subscribe if you're already invested in Tori and Ben's impossible situation. Kids, Ben said quietly, his voice carrying an odd note that made both twins look at him with sudden attention. Maybe you should go upstairs for a few minutes. Your mom and I need to talk. About time, Brent muttered, but he was already moving toward the doorway. Come on, Becca. Let's give the adults some space to figure out what we've known for years. As the twins disappeared upstairs, their voices fading into the comfortable chaos of homework and music, Ben and Tori found themselves alone in the kitchen that had been the heart of their unconventional family for 18 years. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and 19 years of careful distance. Ben moved closer, drawn by instincts he'd spent 2 decades trying to suppress. Tori, he said softly, what's really going on? She looked up at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with, overlaid with 18 years of gentle patience, quiet strength, and unwavering devotion to a family that had never officially belonged to him. The secret sat in her throat like a stone, too large to swallow, too dangerous to speak. I found something today, she whispered, something that changes everything. Ben's hands came up to frame her face with devastating gentleness, his thumbs tracing the high curves of her cheekbones. Then tell me. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. The simple promise nearly undid her. This was Ben at his core, the man who'd held her together through David's death, who'd been her partner in raising children without ever overstepping boundaries he thought existed, who'd loved her from a careful distance for 18 years because he believed she belonged to someone else. Ben. His name was barely a breath on her lips. "I'm here." His voice carried the same gentle authority that had gotten her through every crisis, every celebration, every ordinary day for nearly 2 decades. "I'm always here." Standing in her kitchen with Ben's hands on her face, Tori felt the weight of 18 years of secrets pressing down on her like a physical force. Tomorrow, she would tell him everything. Tomorrow, she would give him back the family he'd never known was his. Tonight, she would hold on to this moment, the last time they would exist in the careful balance they'd maintained for so long, before the truth changed everything forever. "The kids are right, you know," she said quietly. "About what?" "About us. About the way we look at each other." She reached up to cover his hands with hers, holding them against her face like an anchor. "About what everyone can see except us." Ben's breath caught, his blue eyes darkening with something that looked dangerously like hope. "Tori, I need you to know," she continued, the words coming faster now, "that whatever I tell you tomorrow, whatever changes, this moment is real. The way you're looking at me right now, the way I feel when you touch me, that's real. Why does it sound like you're saying goodbye? Because in a way, I am." She stepped back, breaking the contact that made it impossible to think clearly. "I'm saying goodbye to the version of us that's existed for 18 years. Because tomorrow, everything changes." Ben stared at her, confusion and longing warring in his expression. "I don't understand." "You will." She moved toward the doorway, needing distance to maintain her resolve. "Ben?" "Yeah. When I tell you the truth tomorrow, remember that every choice I made was about protecting the people I love, even when those choices hurt. Tori, you're scaring me." "Don't be scared." She managed a smile that felt like her heart breaking. "Be ready for the most important conversation of our lives." As Ben left that night, the same ritual of careful goodbye they'd performed 1,000 times, Tori stood at her kitchen window watching his truck disappear into the darkness. In her pocket, the DNA test results felt like they were burning through the fabric. Tomorrow, she would tell Benjamin Wilson that he'd been a father for 18 years without knowing it, that the children he'd loved and guided were biologically his own, that the woman he'd loved from a distance was finally ready to close that distance forever. Tomorrow, their lives would finally begin. Chapter 2. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made difficult conversations feel inevitable. Tori stood at her kitchen window, watching Becca and Brent walk to their cars, their easy sibling banter carrying on the morning air. In 15 minutes, Ben would arrive, and 18 years of careful deception would finally end. At exactly 9:15, his truck pulled into the driveway. Through the windshield, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel just a moment too long before he turned off the engine. He knew something significant was coming. She opened the door before he could knock, taking in the sight of him. Work clothes already dusty from an early job site visit, hair slightly mussed, those blue eyes holding a mixture of concern and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "Coffee?" she offered, falling back on ritual to steady her nerves. "Please." They moved through the morning routine with careful politeness, both aware that something fundamental was about to shift between them. Ben settled at the kitchen table while Tori prepared coffee with unnecessary precision, the DNA test results waiting in the drawer like a loaded weapon. "You said we needed to talk," Ben said quietly, accepting the mug she offered. "About everything." Tori sat across from him, the same configuration they'd shared for countless family discussions over the years. Except today, they weren't discussing the children's schedules or school events. Today, they were going to discuss the fact that those children were his. "Do you remember what you said to me at David's funeral?" she began. Ben's expression grew troubled. "I said a lot of things that day. You said David was lucky because he got to love me. You said I was worth fighting for." Her voice caught slightly. "You said he'd want you to take care of us." "I meant every word." "I know, that's what made it so hard." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, using the warmth to steady herself. Ben, there's something I never told you about my last conversation with David. Something he said the night before he died. Ben went very still. What did he say? The memory rose like a tide. David in the same kitchen, holding newborn Becca while infant Brent slept in his carrier, his dark eyes full of a love so profound it had broken her heart then and haunted her ever since. He knew, she whispered, about us. About that night before our wedding. The coffee mug slipped from Ben's hands, hitting the table with a sharp crack that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. That's impossible. He knew the babies weren't his. The words came out in a rush, 18 years of suppressed truth finally breaking free. He suspected from the beginning, but when they were born and Brent looked exactly like you did as a baby. Jesus Christ, Ben pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. If he knew, why didn't he say anything? Why would he let me think? Because he loved them. And he loved you. Tori's voice broke on the words she'd carried alone for so long. He said the twins were a gift, proof that sometimes the people we love most find their way to each other, even when we think we've lost them forever. Ben paced to the window, his hands running through his hair in a gesture of overwhelmed disbelief. Outside, the morning sun illuminated the backyard where he'd taught the twins to garden, where he'd built them a treehouse, where he'd been their father in every way except name. How could you not tell me this? His voice was raw, with 18 years of misdirected guilt. How could you let me believe I was betraying my best friend by loving his widow and children? Because David made me promise. Tori stood too, facing him across the kitchen that had witnessed so many careful conversations. He knew you'd torture yourself with guilt, that you'd keep your distance out of respect for his memory. He didn't want that for any of us. But you let it happen anyway. Ben turned from the window, his blue eyes dark with hurt and confusion. You kept the distance. You let me torture myself. Because I was terrified. The admission burst from her like a dam breaking. I was 24 years old with 2 babies and a dead husband, and the only man I'd ever truly loved was looking at me like I was something precious and breakable. I was scared that if you knew the truth about the twins, you'd stay out of obligation instead of choice. The kitchen fell silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock and the distant sound of morning traffic. Ben leaned against the counter, his head tilted back as he processed 18 years of unnecessary guilt and missed opportunities. All this time, he said finally, I thought you chose him. Completely, absolutely chose him over me. I did choose him, Tori said quietly, but not because I didn't love you, because I loved you too much to destroy your friendship. And our night together? The question hung between them like a bridge she could either cross or burn forever. In the drawer, the DNA test results waited to provide scientific proof of what her heart had always known. That night was goodbye, she whispered. It was me trying to memorize what it felt like to be loved by you before I had to spend the rest of my life pretending it never happened. Ben stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, understanding, and something that looked dangerously like the love she'd seen in his eyes 19 years ago. But it did happen, he said, moving closer. And it meant something. It meant everything. She reached into the drawer, pulling out the papers that would change their lives forever. Ben, there's something else. Something I discovered yesterday. Her hands were shaking as she held out the DNA test results, watching his face as comprehension dawned. Probability of paternity, 99.99%, he read aloud, his voice barely audible. They're mine. They've always been yours, Tori said softly, in every way that matters. Ben sank into a chair, the scientific proof trembling in his hands. 18 years. I've been a father for 18 years and never knew it. You knew it in your heart. You loved them like they were yours from the very beginning, because they were mine. He looked up at her with a mixture of awe and devastation. Every birthday party where I sat with the other family friends instead of the parents. Every school conference where I held back my opinions because I thought I didn't have the right. Every time they introduced me as Ben instead of... His voice broke. 18 years of restrained paternal love finally acknowledged. They love you as a father, Tori said fiercely. They always have. The biology doesn't change that. It just explains why it felt so natural. Ben stood abruptly, moving to her with sudden purpose. His hands came up to frame her face the same way they had the night before, but now his touch carried different weight, different permission. "Tori," he said, her name rough with 20 years of suppressed longing. "Ben, I need you to know something." His thumbs traced her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "I've loved you since we were 23 years old. I loved you when you were engaged to my best friend. I loved you when you were his wife. I loved you when you were his widow. Every single day for the past 19 years, I've loved you." The confession washed over her like absolution. "But you never said, because I thought I'd lost my chance forever. Because I thought you belonged to someone else." His forehead touched hers, and for a moment they breathed the same air, existed in the same space without barriers between them. "Because I'm an idiot who spent 18 years loving his own children from the outside, instead of claiming what was mine all along." "We're both idiots," she whispered. "David knew we loved each other. The kids have been trying to push us together for years, and we've been dancing around the truth like it was going to hurt someone. Maybe it was. Maybe we needed these 18 years to become the people who could handle this truth." Ben's lips brushed hers, soft and questioning, asking permission for what they'd both wanted for 20 years. When she kissed him back, it was with 19 years of suppressed love finally set free. This wasn't the desperate goodbye they'd shared before her wedding. This was hello. This was beginning. This was finally claiming what had always belonged to them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Tori rested her forehead against his chest and felt the steady beat of his heart, the same rhythm that had comforted her through David's death, through 18 years of single parenthood, through every crisis and celebration. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we tell the kids," Ben said, his arms tightening around her. "Together. As their parents." The word sent a thrill through her that was equal parts terror and joy. Parents, not guardian and family friend, not widow and helpful neighbor. Parents. They might be angry about the lying. "Then we help them understand that loving me doesn't diminish David's memory, that having two fathers who love them completely is a gift, not a betrayal." Tori pulled back to look at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with overlaid with 18 years of unconscious fathering. "You really think we can do this? Become a real family after all this time?" Ben's smile was soft but certain. "Sweetheart, we've been a real family for 18 years. We just never made it official." The endearment, casual and possessive, made her heart flutter. "I'm scared." "So am I. But not of this." He gestured between them, encompassing the kitchen where they'd finally told the truth, the house where they'd raised children together without acknowledging what they were doing. "I'm scared of wasting another day pretending we don't belong together." Before Tori could respond, the sound of a car door slamming echoed from outside. Through the window, she could see Becca's Corolla in the driveway. "She forgot something," Tori said, instinctively stepping back from Ben's embrace. "No." Ben caught her hand, lacing their fingers together with deliberate intention. "No more hiding. We're going to have to get used to being together openly." The front door opened with Becca's characteristic energy. "Mom, I forgot my... Oh." She stopped in the kitchen doorway, taking in their joined hands and the obvious emotional intensity with 18-year-old perception. "Hi, sweetheart," Ben said, his voice rougher than usual, but carrying a new note of authority. "You told him," Becca said simply, looking between them with growing understanding. "About the DNA test." Tori's heart stopped. "How did you—" "Mom, I've known since I was 15 that something didn't add up about our family genetics. I took biology, remember? When I realized you'd ordered a DNA test last week, it wasn't hard to figure out what you were looking for." Ben stared at their daughter, his daughter, with a mixture of pride and amazement. "You knew?" "I suspected. Brent looks exactly like you did in those old photos Grandma Maggie keeps showing us. And we both have your hands, your way of thinking about spatial problems." Becca moved closer, her young face serious but not upset. "The question is, what are you guys going to do about it?" The directness of the question caught both adults off guard. Tori looked at Ben, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "We're going to tell your brother," Ben said finally. And then we're going to figure out how to be the family we should have been all along." "Good." Becca's smile was brilliant, transforming her face with relief and joy. "Because honestly, watching you two dance around each other for years has been exhausting. We've been waiting for you to grow up and claim what was obviously yours." When she hugged them both, first Ben, then Tori, then somehow all three together in the kind of embrace they'd never allowed themselves before, Ben whispered into her hair, "I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud to be your father." "I love you too, Dad," she whispered back, the words settling between them like a missing piece finally found. As Becca gathered her forgotten textbook and headed back to school, chattering about telling Brent and planning family dinners where they could finally be honest about what they were to each other, Tori and Ben found themselves alone again in the kitchen where everything had changed. "One down, one to go," Ben said softly. "Brent's going to be harder. He's always been more protective of David's memory. Then we help him understand that this doesn't take anything away from David. It just adds to the love that surrounds him." Ben pulled her close again, and this time there was no careful distance, no respectful boundaries, just the two of them, finally free to love each other the way they'd wanted to for 20 years. "No more secrets," he said. "No more secrets," she agreed. "Just truth, just us. Just the family we've always been, finally willing to admit it." When he kissed her again, deeper this time, with the promise of nights they'd no longer have to spend apart, Tori felt 18 years of careful restraint dissolve into something that looked remarkably like forever. Tonight, they would tell Brent the truth that would complete their family circle. Tonight, they would finally stop pretending and start living as the family they'd always been in their hearts. Tonight, they would come home to each other at last. Chapter 3. The hours until Brent's return stretched endlessly. Ben had stayed, the two of them moving through Tori's house with a different energy now that the truth was spoken between them. Every casual touch, his hand on her back as he passed behind her chair, her fingers brushing his as they reached for the same coffee cup, carried new weight, new permission. But underneath the quiet joy of finally being allowed to love each other openly ran a current of nervousness about the evening's conversation with Brent. Unlike Becca, who processed emotions through intuition and acceptance, their son approached everything with careful logic and fierce protectiveness of the family narrative they'd built around David's memory. "What if he can't accept it?" Tori asked as they prepared dinner together, another domestic ritual that felt different now that they could acknowledge what they were building. "Then we give him time," Ben replied, stirring pasta sauce with the ease of someone who'd helped with family meals for 18 years. "We show him that loving me doesn't diminish David's place in his heart. But Ben, we're asking him to restructure his entire understanding of identity, family, everything he believes about himself." Ben set down the wooden spoon and turned to face her fully, his hands settling on her waist with natural possessiveness. "What we're telling him is that he's been loved by one more person than he thought, that the man who's been his unofficial father is actually his father. We're not taking anything away, we're adding to it." The sound of Brent's Honda in the driveway cut through their conversation. Tori's hands began trembling again, the familiar anxiety that had marked every major revelation in this long day of truth-telling. "Hey, family," Brent called as he entered through the kitchen door, using the casual greeting that carried more significance now. At 18, he moved with the unconscious grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, tall and lean like Ben, with those same artistic hands that gestured as he spoke. "How was work?" Tori asked, proud that her voice sounded normal. "Good. Mrs. Patterson asked me to redesign the front window display. She said I have an intuitive sense for visual flow." He grinned with unconscious pride, then looked at Ben with eager anticipation. "You should see it. I used those principles you taught me about creating natural sightlines through architectural space." Ben's throat worked visibly before he could respond. 18 years of proud fatherhood suddenly given context and meaning. "I'd love to see it. You could come by tomorrow if you want." Brent moved to the refrigerator, then paused as he noticed the subtle tension in the room. "Everything okay?" "You both look kind of intense," Tori supplied. "Yeah. Did something happen with Becca?" "Becca's fine," Ben said gently. "But we do need to talk to you about something. Something important about our family." Brent's expression grew serious, the playfulness fading as he recognized the weight in their voices. Family meeting? Something like that? As they settled around the kitchen table, the same space where so many important conversations had happened over the years, Tori was struck by how right this felt. The three of them, approaching a difficult truth as the family unit they had always been. Before we begin, Tori said, her voice steadier than she'd expected, I want you to know that everything we tell you comes from love. Every choice that was made, every secret that was kept was done to protect you and your sister. Secrets? Brent's eyebrows rose, his quick mind already working through possibilities. What kind of secrets? Ben leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table between them. Brent, you know I've loved you and Becca since you were born. You know I've been part of your life in every significant way. You've been like a father to us, Brent said slowly, his gaze moving between them with growing understanding. Everyone's always said that. Not like a father, Ben said quietly. Your father. Your biological father. The silence that followed was profound. Brent stared at them, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that looked like betrayal. That's impossible, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. David Nightingale is my father. David was your father, Tori said gently. He raised you for the first 6 months of your life. He loved you completely. He chose you as his son, even knowing the truth about your paternity. Even knowing what? The question came out sharp. Ben took a deep breath, steeling himself for the hardest part. Even knowing you and Becca weren't his biological children, even knowing you were mine. If the first revelation had been shocking, this one was devastating. Brent went completely still, his face draining of color. He knew? From the beginning, Tori said softly. When you were born, you looked exactly like Ben as a baby. David saw the resemblance immediately. And he said nothing. He just pretended we were his? He didn't pretend, Ben said firmly. You were his children in every way that mattered. Biology doesn't determine love, Brent. David chose to love you, chose to be your father, chose to raise you as his own. But you're my actual father. Brent's gaze fixed on Ben with laser intensity. And you've known this whole time. No, Ben said quickly. I found out this morning. Your mother just told me. This morning? Brent turned to Tori and she could see the hurt building in his eyes, Ben's eyes. You've known my entire life that Ben was my real father, and you never told either of us. I was trying to protect everyone. Protect us from what? Brent stood abruptly, pacing to the window with nervous energy that mirrored his biological father's movements. From the truth? From knowing where we really came from? The anger in his voice was like a physical blow, but Tori forced herself to accept it. I was trying to honor David's wishes. He made me promise never to tell because he wanted Ben to love us out of choice, not obligation. So instead, you gave us 18 years of lies? Brent spun around to face them, his young face flushed with confusion and hurt. Instead, you let me spend my whole life believing my father was some perfect man I never got to know, while my actual father was right here the whole time. David was a good man, Tori said fiercely. He loved you completely. But he wasn't my father. The words exploded from Brent with the force of 18 years of confused identity. Ben is my father, and no one thought to mention this. Ben stood slowly, moving to stand beside Tori in a show of unified front. Your mother was in an impossible situation, trying to balance loyalties and responsibilities that should never have been hers to carry alone. There was a simple solution, Brent said with the absolute certainty of youth. Tell the truth. Let Ben be our father from the beginning, instead of making him hover around the edges of our lives pretending to be just a family friend. I wasn't pretending, Ben said quietly. I was loving you the only way I thought I was allowed to. But you wanted more, didn't you? Brent's voice cracked slightly. You wanted to be our real father, not just the guy who helped out because he felt sorry for us. Every day, Ben admitted, every single day for 18 years. The raw honesty seemed to take some of the fight out of Brent's anger. He studied Ben's face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. You really didn't know. I really didn't know, Ben confirmed. If I had known you were my son, nothing would have kept me from claiming you. Nothing would have stopped me from being your father officially, completely, from the very beginning." Brent was quiet for a long moment, his analytical mind working through the implications. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer, but no less intense. "So let me understand this. You and Mom were in love 20 years ago, but she was engaged to David. You slept together anyway. She got pregnant with twins, married David, and let him raise us until he died. Then she spent 18 years letting you love us from the sidelines while keeping the secret that we were actually your children." "That's essentially accurate," Tori said quietly. "And Ben spent 18 years being our father in everything but name, never knowing we were his, thinking he was honoring his dead friend's memory." "Yes. And David knew the whole time but chose to love us anyway, making Mom promise never to tell the truth because he wanted everyone to choose love, freely instead of out of obligation." "That's right." Brent stopped pacing and looked at them both with an expression that cycled through amazement, exasperation, and something that might have been grudging admiration. "You know what? That's actually incredible." Both Tori and Ben stared at him in surprise. "Incredible," Tori repeated, "in a completely insane, unnecessarily complicated way." "Yes." Brent's smile was small but genuine. "Think about it. I had one father who loved me so much, he chose to raise me knowing I wasn't biologically his. And I had another father who loved me so much, he spent 18 years being my dad without even knowing I was his son." He looked between them with Ben's steady gaze and Tori's emotional intelligence. "I mean, it's completely crazy that you all made it so hard on yourselves. But the love was real. All of it." Tori felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Are you saying you're not angry?" "Oh, I'm furious," Brent said matter-of-factly. "I'm angry that you lied to me for 18 years. I'm angry that Ben missed out on being my official father all this time. I'm angry that you all put yourselves through unnecessary pain." He moved closer, his expression softening. "But I'm not angry about the love, and I'm not angry about who I am or where I came from. Because the truth is, I've always known Ben was my father. Maybe not biologically, but in every way that actually matters." Ben's voice was rough when he spoke. "Brent. Yeah? I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the man you've become, the way you think, the way you handle difficult situations. I've been proud of you every day of your life, but I never felt like I had the right to say it." "You had the right," Brent said firmly. "You've always had the right. You're my dad, Ben. You have been since I was 6 months old." When Brent crossed the room and wrapped his arms around Ben, both men broke down completely. 18 years of careful emotional distance dissolved as father and son held each other with desperate relief. "I love you, son," Ben whispered. "I love you too, Dad," Brent replied, and the words settled between them like coming home. As they pulled apart, both men crying openly but their faces holding peace that had been missing for 18 years, Tori watched her family finally become whole. "So what happens now?" Brent asked, echoing his sister's earlier question. "Now we stop pretending," Ben said, reaching for Tori and drawing her into their family circle. "Now we become the family we've always been, officially." "Are you going to get married?" Brent asked with characteristic directness. Ben looked at Tori with love and hope and promise. "If your mother will have me." "Is that a proposal?" Tori asked, laughing through her tears. "It's a long overdue proposal," Ben corrected. "Victoria Nightingale, will you marry me? Will you finally let me be your husband officially?" "Yes," she said, the word carrying 20 years of suppressed longing. When Ben kissed her, it was different from their earlier kisses of confession and reunion. This one was a promise made in front of their son, a claim staked without shame or secrecy. "About time," Brent said when they broke apart. "Becca owes me $20. "You bet on us?" Tori asked. "We've been betting on you for years. Every family gathering where you danced around each other. Every time Ben looked like he wanted to kiss you but didn't." Brent grinned with pure Ben's expression. "We knew you belonged together." The evening that followed was filled with practical discussions mixed with emotional revelations. They called Becca, who screamed with joy over the phone before demanding to know when the wedding would be. They discussed name changes, legal adoptions, and how to tell extended family and friends. But underneath all the logistics was the simple reality of finally being able to exist as the family they had always been in their hearts. The weight of family secrets can feel unbearable, but sometimes telling the truth really does set everyone free. Have you ever discovered that the thing you were most afraid to reveal was actually the key to finding happiness? Share your thoughts on how love can survive years of separation and denial, and whether some things really are worth waiting for. Don't forget to subscribe if this story has touched your heart. As the night grew late and Brent headed upstairs to process everything they'd discussed, Ben and Tori found themselves alone in the kitchen where it all began. "I can't believe we actually did it," Tori said, loading dinner dishes into the dishwasher. "Which part? Finally telling them the truth, getting engaged, or watching our children handle massive revelations with more maturity than we've shown in 18 years. "All of it." She turned to face him, marveling at how different everything felt now that they could be honest. "This morning I woke up as a single mother with an impossible secret. Tonight I'm going to bed as your fiancé with 2 children who know exactly who they are." Ben moved to stand in front of her, his hands settling on her waist with the possessiveness he no longer had to hide. "How does it feel?" "Scary. Wonderful. Right." She looked up at him with wonder. Like coming home after 20 years of being lost. But even as they stood together in her kitchen, finally free to love each other openly, both knew their journey was far from over. The passion they had suppressed for 20 years was building between them like a storm, and tonight would be the first night they could claim each other without guilt, without secrets, without the careful boundaries that had kept them apart. The most intense chapters of their love story lay just ahead. When he kissed her this time, it was with the slow, thorough attention of a man who finally had all the time in the world. No more stolen moments, no more careful restraint, no more pretending that the fire between them didn't exist. "Tori," he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with 20 years of suppressed desire. "Come home with me tonight, to my place. I want to wake up with you in my arms tomorrow morning, officially mine for the first time in 20 years. The invitation sent heat spiraling through her that had nothing to do with the warm kitchen air. After 2 decades of careful distance, the thought of finally completely belonging to him was both terrifying and intoxicating. "The kids are 18 years old and have been matchmaking us for years. They'll be fine." His eyes darkened with desire and something deeper, the profound satisfaction of finally claiming what had always been his. "Besides, we have 20 years to make up for." Tori smiled, feeling younger and more hopeful than she had in decades. "In that case, Mr. Soon-to-be-my-husband, take me home." As they turned off the lights and gathered their things, Tori caught sight of the DNA test results still on the counter. The clinical language that had seemed so earth-shattering yesterday looked ordinary now, just confirmation of what everyone's hearts had always known. Ben followed her gaze and picked up the papers, folding them carefully. Evidence for the adoption paperwork. Evidence that we're finally ready to be who we've always been. Evidence that some things are worth waiting 20 years for. He took her hand as they walked toward the door, and Tori felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. No more careful distances, no more pretending, no more secrets. Just love, finally free to be itself. Just family, finally whole. Just the beginning of the most passionate chapter of their lives. 20 years in the making. Chapter 4. Ben's apartment felt different as they crossed the threshold together. Not the careful visit of a family friend, but the homecoming of a woman finally claiming her place in the life of the man she'd loved for 20 years. The space reflected him perfectly. Clean lines, natural materials, architectural drawings scattered across the dining table, and photographs of Becca and Brent from every stage of their lives covering the mantel like a shrine to the children he'd loved without knowing they were his. "You kept pictures of them everywhere," Tori said softly, moving to study the collection of images that chronicled 18 years of birthdays, graduations, and ordinary moments. "They were the most important part of my life," Ben replied, his voice rough with emotion, "even when I thought I didn't have the right to claim them." She turned to face him in the soft lamplight, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with, overlaid with 18 years of unconscious fatherhood, patient love, and careful restraint, finally set free. "Ben," she whispered. He crossed the room to her with measured steps, his blue eyes dark with 20 years of suppressed longing. When his hands came up to frame her face, his touch held reverence mixed with possession, the gentle intensity of a man who'd waited half a lifetime to touch her without guilt. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back to careful distances and respectful boundaries." "I've been sure since I was 23 years old," she replied, leaning into his touch. "I just spent 20 years being too scared to admit it." His lips found hers with the hunger of decades of denial finally breaking free. This wasn't the tentative kiss of confession or the promise of engagement. This was claiming possession, the physical manifestation of emotional truth too long suppressed. Tori melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, as 20 years of careful control dissolved into need and want, and the desperate desire to finally be his without reservation. "God, Tori," he breathed against her mouth, his voice shaking with restraint. "I've dreamed about this for so long." "No more dreaming," she whispered back. "No more waiting. No more pretending we don't belong to each other." When he lifted her, carrying her, toward his bedroom with the sure confidence of a man claiming what was rightfully his, Tori felt the last of her defenses crumble. In his arms, she wasn't the careful widow or the protective mother or the woman carrying impossible secrets. She was simply Tori, beloved and desired, and finally free to love without consequence. The bedroom was as perfectly him as the rest of the apartment, minimalist furniture, soft lighting, and windows that looked out over the city where he'd built his career while building a family he couldn't officially claim. He set her down beside the bed with exquisite gentleness, his hands trembling slightly as they traced the line of her jaw. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you through everything. Your engagement, your marriage, your grief. 18 years of thinking I couldn't have you. I love you, and I want you. And I need you to know that this isn't just about making up for lost time." "What is it about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's about coming home. It's about finally being allowed to love you the way I've wanted to since we were kids. It's about claiming our future instead of mourning our past." When he kissed her again, it was with a reverence that made her feel precious, cherished, worthy of the love she'd spent 20 years believing she couldn't have. His hands moved over her with patient thoroughness, relearning curves he'd memorized once and carried in his heart through 2 decades of separation. "Ben," she sighed as his mouth found the sensitive spot beneath her ear, the place that had haunted his dreams since their one night together 19 years ago. "Right here, sweetheart. Right here with you, finally." Time seemed to slow as they discovered each other again. Older now, marked by years and responsibility and loss, but somehow more beautiful for having survived the long journey back to each other. Every touch carried weight, every kiss held promise, every whispered endearment was a claim staked against a future that finally belonged to them. When they came together, it was with the desperation of lovers denied too long and the tenderness of hearts that had never stopped belonging to each other. In the soft darkness of his bedroom, with the city lights painting patterns on their skin, Tori finally understood what it meant to be complete. This was what she'd been missing all these years, not just physical intimacy, but the soul-deep satisfaction of being known and chosen and claimed by the person who understood her most completely. In Ben's arms, she wasn't broken or guilty or afraid. She was whole. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the aftermath of 20 years of suppressed longing finally expressed, Tori's head on Ben's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked quietly, his voice still rough with emotion. "Only that we waited so long," she replied, pressing a kiss to the warm skin beneath her cheek. "What about you?" "I regret every day we spent pretending we didn't love each other. I regret every night I went to bed alone when I could have been holding you. I regret 18 years of loving our children from the outside instead of claiming my place in their lives from the beginning." She lifted her head to look at him, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "But not tonight. Tonight is perfect. Tonight is everything I've wanted since I was 25 years old, and thought I'd lost you forever. You never lost me, Ben. I was always yours, even when I couldn't admit it." He pulled her up for another kiss, slower this time, less desperate but no less intense. When they broke apart, his smile was soft with contentment and promise. "Mrs. Soon-to-be Wilson," he said, testing the name again. "Mr. Father of my children," she replied with a grin that felt younger than her 42 years. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because you're going to be hearing it for the next 50 years. As they settled back into comfortable intimacy, Tori marveled at how right this felt. Not new, exactly, but finally honest. Not the beginning of their love story, but the end of the careful distance that had kept them apart. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of revelations and adjustments as their unconventional family learned to exist openly. There were challenges, explaining the situation to extended family, handling the legal complexities of adoption and name changes, navigating the emotional landscape of finally being allowed to love each other publicly. But there were also moments of pure joy. Ben walking into a parent-teacher conference and introducing himself as Becca's father without qualification. Tori wearing an engagement ring to work and answering questions about her fiancé with honest pride. The twins casually referring to Dad and Mom without the careful qualifications they'd used for 18 years. 3 months later, Dr. James Wellington sat across from them in his office, shaking his head with rueful amusement as he signed the final adoption papers. "I have to say," the family friend said, removing his glasses to clean them with unnecessary thoroughness, "I never thought this day would come. 18 years. I've been waiting for you three to figure out what everyone else could see." "Everyone else?" Ben asked with interest. "Your mother knew, of course. Maggie took one look at those babies and saw her son's features staring back at her. Sarah suspected, though she never said anything directly. And anyone with eyes could see the way you looked at each other." "Then why didn't someone say something?" Tori asked. "Because David asked us not to," Wellington replied gently. "He made it clear that he wanted you all to choose love freely, not out of obligation or revelation. He was protecting your right to find your own way to happiness. Even if it took 18 years? Even then, David always said the best love stories take time to unfold, properly." As they left the office with legal documents that finally made official what had always been true in their hearts, Ben caught Tori's hand and pulled her close. "Any second thoughts about marrying into this complicated family?" he asked with mock concern. "None whatsoever," she replied firmly. "Though I reserve the right to complain loudly about how long it took us to get here. Deal. As long as I get to spend the next 50 years making up for lost time. Deal." The weight of family secrets can feel unbearable, but sometimes telling the truth really does set everyone free. Have you ever discovered that the thing you were most afraid to reveal was actually the key to finding happiness? Share your thoughts on how love can survive years of separation and denial, and whether some things really are worth waiting for. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for more incredible tales of love conquering the impossible. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Victoria Nightingale became Victoria Wilson in a ceremony held in the backyard where Ben had spent 18 years being an unofficial father to his biological children. The guest list was small but significant. Maggie Wilson crying happy tears as she finally got to plan her son's wedding, Dr. Wellington beaming with the satisfaction of a secret finally served its purpose. Even Sarah Nightingale flying in from Portland to witness the union that honored her brother's memory, while acknowledging the love that had always existed beneath the surface. Becca and Brent served as maid of honor and best man respectively, their joy in their parents' happiness evident in every smile, every laugh, every proud moment of finally being able to celebrate the family they'd always known they were. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed by everyone who mattered, not the desperate goodbye of 20 years ago or the tentative hello of their reunion, but the confident claim of two people who'd finally stopped running from their destiny. "Finally," Becca called out as they broke apart, her voice carrying love and exasperation and profound relief. "About time," Maggie Wilson added with maternal satisfaction. "Told you so," Brent said smugly, making everyone laugh. The reception was held in the same backyard, with tables set up under string lights and food prepared by friends who'd watched their love story unfold over 2 decades of careful pretense. As the sun set and the lights came on, Tori found herself in Ben's arms for their first dance as husband and wife. "No more pretending," Ben murmured against her ear as they swayed together. "No more secrets," she agreed. "Just us. Just our family. Just the rest of our lives." Around them, their community celebrated with the particular joy that comes from witnessing something that should have happened long ago finally coming to pass. Their children danced together, officially siblings now, their resemblance to Ben unmistakable in the warm light. Extended family and friends toasted the couple who'd taken 20 years to admit what everyone else had known from the beginning. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, the new Wilson family found themselves alone on the back porch, where so many careful conversations had taken place over the years. "So," Ben said, pulling his wife close without any pretense of propriety, "how does it feel to be officially married to the man you've been in love with for 20 years? "Like coming home," Tori said, settling into his arms with perfect ease. "Like finally being allowed to breathe, like the beginning of the life we were always supposed to live." "And the kids? Are adults who couldn't be happier that their parents finally figured out what they've been waiting for years to celebrate?" From inside the house came the sound of Becca and Brent cleaning up, their voices mixing with laughter as they rehashed the day's events and probably planned their parents' honeymoon for them. The normalcy of it, the comfortable domesticity of a family handling the aftermath of celebration together, struck Tori as miraculous after 20 years of careful choreography. "Look at them," she said softly, watching their children through the window. "They're so comfortable with all of this, like they've been waiting for us to catch up to what they already knew. Smart kids. They get it from both sides of the family now." Ben laughed, the sound free and uncomplicated in a way she'd never heard from him before. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, father of my children, love of my life, husband of exactly 6 hours and counting, and the rest of our lives to go." "The rest of our lives," she agreed. From inside came Becca's voice. "Mom, Dad, we saved you cake." "Dad." The word still sent a thrill through Ben every time one of his children used it, official acknowledgement of the role he'd been playing for 18 years. "Coming," he called back, then looked down at his wife with complete contentment. "Ready to go be a family, Mrs. Wilson?" "We've always been a family, Mr. Wilson. We just get to admit it now." Hand in hand, they walked back into the house where their children waited with cake and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family celebration. The same kitchen where this revelation had started with DNA test results and trembling hands now hosted the aftermath of a wedding 18 years in the making. Love doesn't always follow the rules we expect, does it? Sometimes the greatest act of love is keeping a secret to protect the people you care about, and sometimes it's finally finding the courage to tell the truth. Tori, Ben, Becca, and Brent learned that families can be beautifully complicated, that love has room for multiple fathers and complex histories, and that some truths are worth waiting for, even if the wait lasts 20 years. Their story reminds us that it's never too late to choose honesty over fear, to claim the love that's been waiting patiently in the shadows, to build the family you're meant to have instead of settling for something that feels safer but incomplete. What impossible choices have you had to make in the name of love? Have you ever discovered that the truth you were most afraid to tell was actually the key to setting everyone free? Share your thoughts on how families can heal from years of secrets and find their way to wholeness. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dear Love Diaries. Tomorrow, we have another incredible tale of love conquering what seems impossible. Until then, remember that the most beautiful families are sometimes the ones that take years to fully recognize themselves, and that love, real love, is always worth the wait.